On behalf of the Patient Safety Authority, I would like to welcome you to this webinar titled Specimen Success, a Network Quality Improvement Journey. My name is Kelly Gibson, and I will be your moderator for this program. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for the webinar. Our first speaker is Lisa Feathers, and she is the Director of Quality in the Pathology Institute of Allegheny Health Network in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She is passionate advocate for quality and patient safety in laboratory medicine with over 30 years of expertise. Our next speaker is Dr. Shelley McGonigal, and she is the healthcare leader dedicated to optimizing patient outcomes and fostering a culture of excellence. She is the Network Director of Quality and Patient Safety at Allegheny Health Network, where she ensures the highest standards of care. Dr. Sara Angelilli is the Director of Clinical Nursing Operations at Allegheny Health Network. Sara leads project and technology implementation as well as process optimization across a 9-hospital healthcare system. Her professional interests include leadership development and healthcare quality improvement. None of the planners or presenters for this educational activity have relevant financial relationships to disclose with ineligible companies whose primary business is producing, marketing, selling, reselling, or distributing healthcare products used by or on patients. Lisa, I will now turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. And as Kelly had mentioned, we have no disclosures to reveal for this presentation. So we have a couple of objectives for today's presentation. The title of our presentation is called Specimen Success, a Network Quality Improvement Journey. So our objectives for today are by the end of the presentation, learners will be able to, 1, describe the FMEA process, and 2, identify strategies to prevent surgical specimen handling errors. Before we start our presentation, let me ask 2 questions to the group here, and please put your responses in the chat. The first question is, why did you come to this session? And secondly, what is one thing you want to take away from this session today?
Yeah, we're getting quite a few on reviewing process and learning how to prevent errors, to prevent some delays. So quite a few good ones here.
Okay, that sounds great. So let's start today with some background on who we are and why we started this project. So we are Allegheny Health Network. We're a health network that's comprised of 9 hospitals, 4 ambulatory surgery centers, and 3 endoscopy centers in southwestern Pennsylvania. So as caregivers, we know that every patient has a story. As healthcare providers, we know that surgical specimen handling is a complex and multidisciplinary process. Before we started our FMEA, we recognized some key challenges and considerations. First, specimen handling is multidisciplinary in nature. It involves various departments such as surgery, pathology, or the clinical labs, as well as personnel, surgeons, nurses, technicians, and couriers. There is time sensitivity in this testing process. Often we are asked to provide an immediate diagnosis during procedures, such as frozen sections. Specimens come from diverse collection points. We receive surgical specimens from ORs to clinics, and this does require some standardized procedures across all locations. Specimen movement is critical. It's important to ensure safe and secure transport, especially for these delicate specimens. And finally, we did have testing variations in our network. Different labs with varying capabilities and turnaround times. We have urban teaching hospitals and as well as community hospitals. So what brought us together was that Allegheny Health Network had 2 serious events for pathology surgical specimens that were reported within 6 months. The first case was a laterality labeling error on a tonsil and lymph node specimens from one of our hospital ORs. A resection was done on the wrong side based on the frozen section findings, and the patient ultimately had to return to the OR after the final pathology report was issued because the discrepancy was discovered. The second serious event we had was an oral lesion from a private dental practice was delivered to the wrong lab by a third-party contracted courier. Now, this private dental practice was not affiliated with Allegheny Health Network. They don't utilize our electronic medical record. And when they telephoned us a few weeks later, inquiring about the surgical pathology results from their patient, after investigation, we could not find the specimen at all. The delivery documentation by the courier was incomplete. They were utilizing paper records. They were lacking signatures for their whole delivery workflow. So these two events forced us to really look at our workflows across the network and to get together as a team to resolve these events. And now I'm going to turn it over to Shelley to talk about the methods that were utilized.
Thank you, Lisa. After those couple events, we did take a pause within our patient safety department, considering the concern regarding specimens, and B, the fact that this was such a big project. We really had to take a deep breath and say, we had already done our CAs on those cases, but we really wanted to say, what is the best way for us to really examine the process from start to finish and make it as big of a safety net as we possibly could? Our methodology was really to do an FMEA. Now, FMEAs can be daunting, and I appreciate that. Actually, I think when we mentioned doing an FMEA, there was a collective deep sigh from the teams, because it is intense and it's a lot of work. But we really felt that because the errors that we had seen, not only our serious events, but others, that it was imperative to really examine from start to finish. So what is an FMEA? So FMEAs are a structured methodology that really takes a look at your potential problems at every step of the process or failures, and their impact on the system before an event occurs. So there's 7 steps to that process. And many of you may know that, we pulled this right from the Joint Commission and their steps. You select a topic. Well, for this instance, we knew our topic was going to be specimen handling. You develop a project charter and stakeholders, describe the process, identify what can go wrong. We select a problem to work on, design and implement the change, and then measure the success. So that is the continuum of an FMEA. I will tell you, for this project specifically, and you will see that we decided to concentrate to start with specimen handling, specifically in our operating rooms, and how those specimens make their way to the lab. So we definitely concentrated on that area versus all the other areas that you could possibly collect a specimen within the hospital. We did identify key stakeholders. Obviously, patient safety was key to this process, as well as our colleagues in lab and pathology. We pulled in our OR leaders and staff. And then also, it was critical for us to make sure that we had surgeons and pathologists that were really at the table from the beginning. The good thing with this project, and not to jump to a later part, but we had very good participation. Folks realized that we could do better. And it really started out very strong with everyone being engaged in the process. I did just put up a snapshot of our charter. We developed very first thing, sat down, and we went through the charter to make sure that people understood that this project relates right back to our mission, vision, and values for AHN. And so we made sure to link it to those aspects of our culture. We defined our objectives. We discussed our committee structure, and then really got going with the difficult part of an FMEA. What we did is describe the process, and this was actually a picture of our flow map, and you might look at that and say, "Oh my goodness," we did too. So there are many steps in the process of by ordering a specimen until it's resulted. And then you can see with each of those steps, the yellow kind of star shapes are issues or problems that could occur with that step. So you can see we had quite a few. Some of the risks that we noticed right out of the gate: communication. So for our patient safety colleagues on this call know, communication is always a root cause in adverse events, or more often than not, let's put it that way. So we knew we had to talk about communication. And then the whole process of ordering. How do we order specimens as they're doing, a case? Distractions are huge. And, obviously, as we know, distractions can lead to adverse events. Assumptions can always get us into trouble, as well as how did that specimen get delivered? So, and as our example in one of our series events, it was all about delivery. We identified what can go wrong. So within an FMEA, this is an important part of the process. Using an FMEA template, we answered each question in the step of the process. So first, each of those blocks, each step in the process, we listed out. The failure mode is identified, and again, it's just what could go wrong in that step. The failure causes, why would that failure happen? And then we move to the effects. What would be the consequence? And then you assign a score for these. So the first score is, we do it on a scale of 1 to 10, the likelihood to occur, the likelihood that you would detect it, and the severity of harm that could be caused. You multiply those out, those three numbers, and that gives you a risk profile number. And then we developed actions to reduce that occurrence. So for our FMEA of specimen handling, that we identified 82 failure modes in our process, from collection to or ordering to delivery. And then we identified the top 10 that we would address. So that, just to level set, this process took just the pure identification of the steps. This took a significant amount of time, and I want to say at least a few months in the process. And we really painstakingly went through with our teams, who were very engaged in the process, because they really wanted to see some changes. So we select a problem to work on. That's our next step. We ranked our top 10. So We listed our top 10 risks. What we did find, consistent with the literature, that there were certainly some inconsistencies in workflow, workarounds, there were human factors, and knowledge deficit. So those were definitely issues that we found. Our top item was our specimen delivery by our courier. And Lisa will be talking about that. And then we did have some certain errors or issues in regards to placing the orders. We use Epic as our electronic medical record. And so there were some issues with that. And I'm not going to read through all these because you'll get them. But certainly how we do the handoff process with the specimen, so that handoff and transition. Specimens are protected, making sure that they don't get thrown away, that they get moved to the back table, and that could create an issue. So we started diligently working on each of these big action items to make sure that we addressed each one and had action plans. Sarah's going to start us off with strategies to prevent surgical specimen handling errors.
So the first thing that we did as we were looking to plan our strategy for the problems that were identified is that we created 2 work streams. The first work stream was the lab work stream, which was led by Lisa. And then the second work stream was the operating room side, which I led with the frontline staff team. We went to the evidence and the literature to identify evidence-based strategies to prevent specimen handling errors. And we have the top key strategies here that we really focus on, which are coming straight out of the AORN guidelines. So for us, what we found was important is to start the process with a preoperative briefing. And in this process, the surgeon would identify key components of the surgery and needs for equipment, including what the anticipated specimens are and the type of processing, so that the operating room staff could get the appropriate containers in advance of the procedure starting. Going back to the communication strategies, we know that it's really important to have read-back methods and closed-loop communication to make sure that we are confirming that we have the correct specimen name and testing type. We implemented measures to protect the specimen on the back field. We evaluated all of the steps in the process to see if there was anything that we could reduce or simplify. We created several memory aids or job aids, as we call them, to assist staff in ensuring that they had all of the skills and the knowledge in the correct order for this process. And then finally, using dedicated spaces for specimen management and limiting it to 1 unlabeled specimen on a workbench at one time. So the first thing is talking about the laboratory specimen handling strategies. We implemented the barcode scanning to assist with tracking for specimens that were collected in ambulatory spaces and sent to centralized labs for processing. That portal created barcoded package labels, and then there were weekly meetings to discuss any service failures and track progress. In addition to that, another optimization was to introduce a standardized OR log sheet so that each staff member was documenting drop-off and pickup for specimens in the same way. And this was a key part of one of our double check processes that we'll talk about in a little bit. In the operating room, the specimen handling strategies first kicked off with a network standardization of our specimen handling guideline. This was a staff-led initiative. We had representation from all of the hospitals, and those staff members poured through the literature and the evidence, compared all of the different guidelines that we had at the hospitals, and we were able to come to one document that represented guidelines for each facility. We talked about some of those key evidence-based strategies in the earlier slide. So in addition to the preoperative briefing, we also encouraged real-time order entry. As the surgeon was calling out the specimen at the field, the nurse was entering those specimens in real time. As that specimen was handed from the surgeon to the surg tech, from surg tech to the nurse, we used our closed loop communication. And then we introduced a double check process at the end of the case. During our sign out, we traditionally review all of the specimens, ensuring that we have the correct name and testing type for each of them. Once that was completed, the surg tech and the nurse would compare the specimen labels to the specimen rec, and they would both initial that, confirming that everything was correct at the end of the case before that was dropped off at the specimen logbook. When the specimens were picked up, there was a second double check process that was instituted. The tech that was picking up the specimens, if there were any discrepancies that were noted, would immediately notify the charge nurse so that we could, as much as possible in real time, make any corrections to those specimens, which would prevent any missteps in that handling process. And so finally, to talk a little bit about our implementation strategies, we had a physician champion that paired with the nurse leader champion and great engagement from our executive team. This project was talked about not only in the OR space, but at the monthly perioperative leadership meetings, at the periop exec meetings, and at the patient safety meetings to make sure that everybody was on the same page. Before the implementation, we did an education blitz, which included online education, rollout of our job aids, which you can see on the right side of the screen, and also huddle notes, so that there was the opportunity to have two-way communication and answer any questions that staff had about the process. We implemented a monthly audit process where both the specimens were being audited for correctness, and then also we had the barcode scanning audits, and all of these project updates were reported out on a monthly basis. With that, I'll hand it over to Lisa to talk about the results.
Yeah, so you're probably wondering, after all of this hard work, what did we find out? So we can move to the next slide. So after we did quite a bit of encouraging to all of the staff involved in the process about reporting any workflow issues, any labeling issues or discrepancies, we found that safety event reporting increased 26% in the first 3 months after we implemented this project year over year. So we were pretty happy with that. As Sara mentioned, her team was conducting OR audits, and we had a lot of success with those OR audits. In the first 3 months, 16 out of 23 departments demonstrated a satisfactory compliance with the checklist that she implemented. And then within 9 months, we had 21 out of 23 departments that were satisfactory in that compliance with the OR checklist. We had implemented barcode scanning with our contracted courier to track specimen movement from, between sites, either the ambulatory sites or within our hospitals. And when we first started our barcode scanning, we were at about 74% compliance. But by the time were fully implemented the barcode scanning, we were up to 91% compliance. So we were very happy with that. And we shared those results with our courier at our weekly meetings. But probably best of all, we've had no serious events reported since October of 2023 when we implemented this project. Now, I will add, since we have submitted this slide deck, we feel like we've noticed an increase in event reporting. So as of last week, we started to re-implement our OR audits. And now I think I'm going to turn it back to Sara for discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. So the first thing to talk about with the implementation of any project is a readiness assessment for change and understanding what facilitates that change to happen. We understand that when change is introduced to team members, they may have some different reactions to that. And so on the right side of the screen is a useful model to think about. This is the Kubler-Ross change curve that outlines when people are presented with changes. At first, they might express some different emotions, including denial or frustration. And at each step in this process, it's really important to meet those staff members where they are, making sure that there is adequate communication, which helps increase the perceived need for change. People are often not motivated to make a change unless there's a reason. So providing information and helping to tap into personal motivation, how they can understand they play a role in this, that it is going to improve outcomes and improve efficiencies in the process, giving them greater work satisfaction, really goes a long way to help support the staff through this change process. Once they start to understand what the change is and why the need for the change is, then you can move into some support, giving them time to explore the change. And then as you move through and you start to see those early wins, it's really important to, once again, communicate that and really celebrate, to build that commitment, to make sure that the change sticks. So some of the things that we contribute to the success of this project is frontline engagement from the start and empowerment to build these processes, to do the research, to understand the whys, and to also help with the engagement and education and rollout plan as we started. We had great leadership support from top down, physicians, nurses, lab. This is a really great example of multidisciplinary collaboration. We had project champions in each of our units that assisted with that education, engagement, reporting of audits on a monthly basis, two-way communication, sending the audits to the project team, and then also reporting out what the results are and progress as we move. And then that continuous communication. There were always updates that were going out, reports, and action planning as needed as we move through this process. So as we're moving into our next phase, Lisa talked a little bit about that project sustainability. In the operating room, we have a specimen committee who has been meeting since the middle of the year in 2023. And one of their standing agenda items is to review monthly incident reports for specimens. And they do troubleshooting during that meeting to do anything where they can introduce additional interventions that would prevent safety incidents from happening in the future. As Lisa talked about, we have recently reintroduced our monthly auditing, which will continue until we see a decrease again in those specimen handling errors that are reported. In addition, we would like to take the success with this project and spread it to other areas within the healthcare system, including procedural departments, ambulatory clinics, and inpatient nursing units. And then finally, just continuing to communicate the value of the FMEA tool as a proactive opportunity to continue to strive for excellence and patient safety. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Shelley.
Thank you. Just on some conclusions. The first conclusion is in regards to the FMEA, it is a process. So it can be time intensive. It's certainly important that we identify opportunities, and it is especially good with complex problems because you get to look at each area. Secondly, making sure that you have those frontline key stakeholders that will assist and really lend that vision of what happens in reality at the line of care. So that was super important for our project. We could not have done this project without those key stakeholders. Leadership's important. So having leaders that were engaged, that were asking, that were interested, it's important. They coach, they mentor. We made sure that we had resources. We had time to work on this project. And then in addition, it's important to promote the results. So having our leaders, this project went the whole way to our board, so that we wanted to make sure, we thought it was that important to really get all of our leaders on each level involved. Being transparent, and hopefully you realize with us presenting here to such a big group, we were transparent in our process. We know that we're not the only ones out there with specimen errors, and I realize quite honestly that this is a problem across the continuum. So sharing these cases and potential errors, it does help with foster trust within work groups. So we thought it was important for us to be transparent and hopefully help others that are having similar issues. And then follow up and auditing. As Lisa said, we do each month, we get a report of all of our specimen errors. And we do go through and take a look at those and say, are we seeing some drift? Are we, as time evolves and the project gets later and later, there is that chance. So we did reinstitute some auditing just to make sure that, we're really maintaining the best practices that we know work. So with that, we'll ask some questions, what questions that you have of us.
Thank you, guys. I know a couple did come through already. Thank you for those individuals. So for the team, can you talk more about your dedicated space for specimen management? Did you use any specific labeling or design to help with the dedicated space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we initially introduced this, we made the recommendation that the specimens should be placed in a yellow bin in the operating room as a visual indicator, so that in handoffs and transitions, people always knew if there were specimens, this is where the specimen is. What we found once we started the project is that one of the teams, using an article that was in AORN, created using a prep stand, had stickers made. So the job aid was turned into a sticker with all of the steps for the specimen handling process, which was put on top of the prep stand. And then that turned into the specimen preparation area, so that everybody once again knew where their specimens were, and it protected them from being accidentally thrown away.
Great, thank you. I hope, Chelsea, that answers your question. The next one, how do you keep up with the education of newly hired employees and providers on the new lab specimen chain of custody process?
Sarah, would
So
you
I
be
can
able to? Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. So I can take that one as well. So that is part of our orientation. We have annual education that goes out. So the new hires will do all of our annual education when they come on board as part of our checklist. And then for all staff annually, we do an update and review all of these processes.
Thank you. I'm interested in learning more about the culture of change. I don't know. I know culture is a big subject, but do you have any other pointers that you would like to provide related to that topic?
Yeah, I think that we are lucky for the health system that we are at, that we have a lot of support for assessing readiness for change, and then having a human-centered approach. So it's making sure that you are keeping the pulse on staff, checking in, seeking their feedback, being able to kind of read the room and see, are they in that like denial frustration phase? Are they early adopters and they're really excited? You can engage them in helping to move the process forward and engaging other team members. So I think that it really comes down to focusing on the staff first, listening and making it a safe space for them to share what they're feeling.
Yeah, I will dovetail on that. We did just complete our survey on patient safety. And so when we look at that survey and the results, that also helps with, making plans for your culture and how to improve the overall culture for patient safety. So you may want to look at your survey on patient safety results as well.
Thank you for that insight. I know with a lot of the feedback we've received from education evaluations, I think one of the biggest challenges or barriers to implementation of strategies is the staff perception of instituting any sort of change. So I think those are great things to keep in mind for our participants on this webinar. Thank you.
Kelly, I would just add just one other part is that, linking it to the patient's story can be really powerful. I mean, if you put yourself in the position of the patient, which, many of us have been there, it's uncomfortable to be a patient. And so this project was pretty easy to get folks engaged when everyone would just sit and say, what if it was you? And your specimen was lost, or your specimen was discarded or labeled incorrectly, you have to go back to the OR. Most people would say, yeah, I would find that unacceptable, right? And so we have found that when you put a patient's story and make sure that your process is patient-centered, people are more likely to make some changes.
Thank you for sharing that, Shelley. That is spot on and some great information. Just to iterate one of the comments that was left, I know Chelsea had said earlier, thank you for the answer, but would also love to see a picture of the job aid if possible in the future. So maybe just an FYI for you all.
Yeah, absolutely. It is embedded within the slide deck. So if you reference the slide deck, you'll also have access to see that.
Perfect, thank you. Another question, are specimens brought to different areas at different times, such as evening, holiday, weekend? If so, was there any easy way to show what routing should be at any given point in time?
Yeah, so this is Lisa. I can take that one. So it is a challenge for us, especially at our larger urban hospitals where, pathology typically is not a 24/7 lab. So we've really, we worked on that specimens from the OR remain in the OR and the lab team will come and pick them up. But for specimens that are delivered to us from the outside, that is a challenge, and we've tried to really enforce a handoff to an individual person. So sometimes when pathology isn't open on a weekend or a holiday, we've had to have those specimens rerouted to a clinical lab space and had to work on education for that lab staff about receiving pathology specimens. So that's where our barcode tracking of specimens was really important, that we had the barcoding, the tracking, the documentation of who received the specimens at what location. So yeah, that's a challenge a lot of us face. Thank you for that question.
Great, thank you. Another question is, did you experience any issues with specimens leaking out of the specimen containers?
Yeah, that's also another issue. And we did work on collection techniques, making sure that the specimen was in the proper size container, that we had containers that were leak proof, and that also that they were selecting the right media for the type of specimens that were being collected. So I think that might be on Sarah's job aid.
Perfect, thank you. Another question has been posed. What corrective action was enforced when individuals or departments were not compliant with the new workflow?
Yeah, so I can speak with that. We did have an education remediation process that we started with. And once people got through the education remediation process, it did go into corrective action if there was the inability to follow those procedures. So we had a stepwise approach to supporting the staff through that.
Great, thank you. I know we still have some time left, so we'll keep going through some of these questions. How did you share success of the FMEA project with frontline staff?
Yeah, so this is Lisa. I can take that one as well. So we had many ways that we communicated this project to the frontline staff. We had staff huddles where we reviewed audit results. We reviewed our audit results from both the OR side and the courier side at department quality meetings. We shared those results with our contracted courier. And then I think probably most importantly, for those frontline staff that entered occurrence reports into our reporting system, we try to follow up with them on what the follow-up was from the other department to kind of close the loop on that communication piece. And I think they felt that that was valuable and that their voice was heard. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Just kind of reflecting back to a prior question, we were talking about corrective action. I think this is getting a little, I don't want to say off topic, but does your organization use the Just Culture algorithm with the involved team members?
Yeah, I can take that. We have a Just Culture philosophy at AHN. And so we have an algorithm that we follow to make sure that we are, really evaluating, is it a human error issue? Is it somebody that's at risk or reckless? Or is it a system failure? And when we started this process, it certainly was a lot of system failure, as obvious with doing the FMEA.
That's kind of interesting. You kind of said it was a lot of system failure before. Are you seeing that kind of shift now as you continue to use the algorithm with events?
Yeah, I would say there's much more just human error and less reckless or at-risk behavior.
Thank you. How did you ensure representation from all relevant departments and roles to get a comprehensive view of potential failure modes?
Yeah, Shelley, I'll take that. When we set up the FMEA and really started with our key stakeholders, Lisa, Sara, and I sat down with our leaders and really discussed who all touches this process, because it's important to have everybody at the table. We felt very strongly about that. True transparency, I've never worked in the lab or in the OR, so I would not be able to comment on their processes, but their staff can. And so really being able to shepherd the process with the folks that really do the work is important.
Getting the right team together is vital, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for that response. Another question is, how did you get surgeon engagement in the process?
Yeah, this is Sara, and I'll take that one. So within the network, we use the dyad model, and in the operating room, it's really a triad model. So the anesthesia leadership, physician leadership, and nurse leadership partnered together, coming in really united in all of these different types of projects and really just daily operations. So they present a united front, and when there are nursing items that need to be addressed, it's addressed by the nursing leader. When there are physician items that need to be addressed, it's addressed either by the physician or the anesthesia lead. And that has been really successful for us in driving change and keeping accountability. And so really, I think it's a structure of having everybody on the same page.
Great, thank you. That's some good insight. The webinar will be ending soon, but we have time for a few more questions. I do have one more here, but if you do have any additional questions, you can type them in the chat box and we will get to them if possible. The last one that I do have currently is, given that this project has shown positive results, what are your plans to sustain the improvements long term?
Yeah, it's Shelley. I can start, and obviously we are continuing to do auditing, as we've said a couple times. We monitor for our reporting to see if we see any upticks in any areas. So that gives us the key, thought that we need to hone in on one or more areas. So the auditing for this specific process continues. We have modified very minimally some of the steps in regards to thinking about other areas that we could implement this. This FMEA was focused in the OR, but as we've discussed previously, there are other areas that labs are collected, or specimens, biopsies, etc., are collected. So thinking about how do we impact those other areas has been a topic of discussion. It's a lot of work, but certainly important.
Yeah, and this is Lisa, and I can say that we continue to have weekly meetings with our contracted courier service, and identify where there are any breakdowns in the workflows. And we continue to monitor the barcode scanning and tracking, so that will probably be ongoing forever.
And the OR Specimen Committee is still meeting on a monthly basis, which is a really engaged group. And so not only do they review the results of the audit and the specimen incident reports monthly, but they also continue to do optimizations. So it's a really great way to just continue expand what we have been able to accomplish through the Specimen FMEA.
Great, thank you. It's been a lot of great information. I don't see any additional questions coming through the chat, but before we wrap up, I would ask one thing. A lot of times when we have educational programs and activities, some people leave kind of maybe feeling overwhelmed, thinking through this FMEA process, and wow, that's a lot of resources, and how do we even take any of this and implement, and especially with resources being very limited. What would you tell our participants today, if there's one thing that you can walk away with, and even at a small level try to implement? What is the one thing you would encourage somebody to try to work on?
Kelly, I would say it is a lot of work. So that, and in a time when many of our organizations are really struggling and have limited staff, one thing one key note to me from a patient safety standpoint is that you've got to start where you are. And it is imperative to get the right people together and start having conversations and making sure that people are aware of the problem and what you need to work on it, whether it's specimen handling or something else. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can work on. You have to start somewhere. I think it's also important to, right from the beginning, think about some of the challenges so that you can be aware of them and know how to climb that barrier. And just making sure that you have people that are engaged in the process and want to be at the table, that they have that desire.
Shelley, thank you for those comments. I think that's great advice. Sarah or Lisa, do you have any final comments before we wrap up?
This is Lisa. So this took quite a while for us to work on, and I don't think, thinking that you're going to have success immediately, it took a lot of, we worked together on this for a very long time, and, we finally started to see results, but I would say don't have expectations that you're going to resolve things immediately. Just consistency, meeting, on a pretty frequent basis would be what I would recommend for everyone.
Thank you so much. Sarah, did you have anything before we close?
Yeah, I really disagree with what they're saying. Even if you just look at the AORN guidelines, there are several pages of recommendations for this. And so if you come up with a list of maybe, 10 to 12 things, pick what you think are going to be the top like 2, maybe 3 impactors. Start there. Once you get success and you celebrate and you see that engagement, then continue to scale from there.
Well, thank you all so much. This was a lot of great information, and we had a lot of participation in the chat. So hopefully some people are going to be taking these strategies and moving things forward. So thank you all so much. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you experienced any issues accessing the evaluation and/or certificate of continuing education, please feel free to direct any inquiries to Shelley Meixel at SHMIXELL@pa.gov. This concludes our webinar. Thank you.